The funeral for Britain's Queen Elizabeth II at Westminster Abbey concluded just a short time ago. The late monarch's coffin is being taken to Windsor Castle to be buried next to her husband. Hundreds of world leaders and dignitaries were present at the funeral in London. They include Singapore President Halimah Yacob. Britain invited heads of state or a representative from every territory with which it has full diplomatic relations. It is the country's first state funeral since 1965. Thousands of people also lined the streets in London to witness the passage of the Queen's casket. You're watching here, the procession now live as it winds its way to Wellington Arch near Hyde Park. There, it will be placed in a hearse to be driven to Windsor Castle, where the late Queen spent much of her time. Ollie Barrett is at Windsor and he joins us live now. What happens next, Ollie?
Well, as you say, the Queen will be transferred into the state hearse from the state gun carriage that she has been carried on through the streets of London after her funeral, pulled by members of the Royal Navy. And that hearse will make its way slowly here to Windsor. When it reaches the outer edges of Windsor Castle, there will be a royal procession. Again, we will see senior members of the royal family walking behind the Queen's coffin as it makes its way to St George's Chapel, just over the walls of Windsor Castle behind me. There will be a committal service, which will, in a sense, be a final chance for many people to say goodbye to the Queen. She will be lowered into the royal vault at the end of that service, which will contain many personal elements chosen by the Queen and members of her family themselves. It's described as a more personal ceremony than we saw at the funeral at Westminster Abbey. Later in the evening here in Windsor, there'll be a private burial ceremony attended just by close members of the royal family. And so there is still a lot that is happening here in Windsor today, and so the eyes of the world really are shifting over the next couple of hours from London to here in Windsor, which, as you were saying, was the place that the Queen really called her home. She particularly spent a lot of time here during the COVID pandemic, and she wanted to be buried here alongside her late husband, Prince Philip, but also alongside both of her parents.
It is the final day of commemorations, the crowds remaining massive. How have security operations, described as a ring of steel, held up so far?
Relatively smooth so far, but officials won't be resting until this day is completely done and dusted. Still a huge amount of people in London, and still a huge amount of people here in Windsor, and a huge amount of people also on the route lining the streets between London and Windsor, which is a journey of around 20 miles, which the Queen's hearse will make very slowly over the course of about 2 hours. And so there is still a lot left to do. There have been some minor hiccups. We saw President Biden getting caught in traffic in London this morning on his way to the funeral with his vast motorcade making its way through the streets of central London. But by and large, things seem to have been going pretty smoothly so far. It's a vast policing operation. We think more than 10,000 police officers are on duty in London and here in Windsor. And at times, authorities have been saying to people those places are effectively now full. So it's best to watch these proceedings at home on your TV if you can. But still, people come.
Indeed. Ollie Barrett in Windsor on the latest on that ongoing procession through London.